Fred.
And I'm going to open up the waiting room. Is that right? Or you guys want to do that part?
Yes.
You can open it up. Yeah. I mean, I'll
Okay, it
open
looks
it.
like you just let them in.
Yeah. Good show. Here they come.
Good evening, everybody.
Come on in.
Welcome to the AEU Salon on Criminal Justice. Crucial topic.
Shine on Harvest Moon became a hit in 1980. 35 years later, Nora Bayes and Jack Crawford were portrayed by
Welcome, Charles and Paula, Betty Chia, Hank, Rosemary, Richard. Welcome.
Hi.
We'll get started in a couple of minutes.
You muted.
I'm now unmuted.
Oh.
I don't need it. Why? Okay. I'll have to figure it out later.
Share screen, record live transcript reactions.
Bart, are you going to spotlight Jan when she's talking?
We could put it on speaker view, I suppose. I won't be long. And I don't know whether Jan's going to, you're not going to want these slides up, are you, Jan?
No.
Okay. We'll put them down very quickly. We should have talked about that before. Oops. I just thought I would put this splash screen up there so people would know they're in the right place.
Yes.
But
Can somebody just remind me how to change my name so I can add my chapter?
Sure. Hi, Richard. If you go to you can go on the participants list. Do you have that open? And then just then hover over your name and you'll see more on the right side, a button. Slide over to more. And
Thank you.
rename. You're welcome.
Gallery view launch meeting, Zoom.
yeah. Okay, I can't see everybody when I have my slides up, so I decided to put them down. This is going to be awkward. I haven't figured that out. Hi, everybody. We've got probably about 3 or 4 minutes to go as we wait for more people to show up. We have quite a few registered, and the time zones for some of us, for me at least, are getting more and more confusing as we go on. Daylight savings time will really be a bad time in my life. Oh, Richard. Yes, you're a rich dad, right? You're the fellow who caught my blooper. Thank you.
Yes.
I appreciated that. Really, it's so embarrassing, but really love it. Thank you.
Welcome to John and Patty and Sandy and Ellen and Roar and
Joy,
Joy.
Ellen, Ralph, Charles,
Nope.
Dor.
Ralph, I'm just going to rename you so that I give you a space between Ralph and Balzac.
Okay. There it is.
Carolyn, you sent out the various links to the resolutions, and the one from 2015 on criminal justice reform, was that when we were in Albany? No, it was for longer ago. We had Governor Patterson speak to us, but that was a different, correct?
I wasn't. That was before my time.
Yeah.
So I don't know.
I think it was the one outside Washington. Because that
In
was
Northern
the first
Virginia.
one I attended, yeah.
Gotcha.
It was the one before St. Louis.
Yeah, it might have been Northern Virginia. Yep.
Yeah.
Yep. Welcome to Rich, who just entered.
Okay. Well, I have 5 after. Let me get my printout here. Should have done it earlier. But I think what I'd like to do, I think it may be time to just go ahead and get started. It's 5 after, and we have a few more people who might show up, but we don't mind if they come in late. It's all right. My name is Carolyn Parker. I am chair of the AEU Ethical Action Committee, and on behalf of the committee, which is sponsoring this tonight, I thank you very much for coming, for giving us your time and your attention to what we believe is going to be a very important and vital discussion. I'm going to share my screen with you for just a little bit, and if I can figure out how to do it without losing track of everybody. There, okay. We at least will have some semblance of an outline for what we're doing this evening. So first of all, this salon is part of our Activism at a Distance series. We've done a couple of these before, and we hope to continue them. These are activism at a distance, not simply because of COVID, but also because we're a continent-wide movement. And so there are times when we're going to have to join together virtually or by any other means to sort of connect, communicate, and do our work. So we're going to be continuing these series even after this. But this one in particular is focusing on criminal justice, and I'll talk about that in a minute. What I want to do is make sure that you know the members of our Ethical Action Committee, which include Jan Broughton, Utaf Morales, John McCormick, Marta Gutenberg, Dorothy Dale, who's a representative from the board, Joan Lewis, who represents the National Ethical Service, Kurt Collier representing the National Leadership Council. Bart Warden is our Executive Director, and Anna Orcutt-Jans handles Communications and Program Support. This committee is a hard-working committee, it's a fun committee, and it has room for more people. So if any of you are interested in working with us after this evening, please let us know. We'll just add another chair or screen as it happens in what we're doing right now. Also, as a part of our tech support this evening, Hugh Taft Morales and Dorothy Dale are going to be our technical gurus, with Bart backing them up on the drums. And we will handle background noise, letting people in. They're going to help us keep track of who's raising their hands. You can use the control at the bottom where you have opportunities for responses and reactions to raise your hand electronically. But we're also going to try, for those of you who sometimes can't quite get there, to see if you wave your hand. But just be patient with us while we do that. We'll ask you when it's time that you think you're going to want to speak up and participate in the meeting, that you do raise your hand so that we can just handle one at a time. Zoom is really tough when too many of us try to talk at once. And during the presentation, if you will keep yourself muted, that will help cut down on the barking dogs and other background music or noise that seems to happen. Okay, this salon is here to talk about criminal justice. It's here to talk. We're going to talk about criminal justice in a specific framework. In 2020, we made a statement that Black Lives Matter to the American Ethical Union. We said that we want to reconcile with our AEU's connections to white supremacy and racism in the past. We want to reaffirm the resolutions that we have against racism and for civil rights, and we want to move forward in an anti-racist framework. Part of that commitment was to look at, part of that commitment was to look at the resolution that was passed in 2015. And the discussion just a moment ago was where were we when we passed that resolution? We think we were near Washington. Was this a Novus hosted event? Thank you, Novus. The response was we were looking at this resolution, and parts of this resolution were that we're going to focus on ending the use of incarceration for people convicted of nonviolent offenses and begin to use rehabilitation and community integration programs that are positive rather than negative and punitive. So we wanted to be active in promoting those kinds of things. We also wanted to end the use of detention for illegal immigrants who've not committed a crime, end solitary confinement, treat drug offenses as a public health concern and look more toward rehabilitation than punishment for that, to eliminate barriers and increase opportunities for people who have been incarcerated so that we do reintegrate them into society with voting rights and efforts to help them find roles in the community with work, and reduce the punitive financial penalties that often follow on incarceration. We also recommended in that resolution that we would reorganize our police departments and their goals to use evidence-based methods, and that we would end the practice of charging individuals under 21 as adults, and remove the for-profit interests and revenue streams from operations of the incarceration and detention system. That's a big laundry list of things that we were hoping to do in the period of time. I'm sorry, I'm going back because I shuffled my slides, so I had to scroll back. But it's a laundry list of things that we hope to be working on in the past 7 years. And 2 years ago, we said we're recommitting to working on that because there's imbalances in our criminal justice system. It unfairly affects people of color, and it creates economic injustice, unnecessary hardships for people who go through that system. We also, just as an additional part of our framework, this year at Assembly, renewed our commitment to a culture of peace. And one of the things, or part of the things that we talked about in looking at the culture of peace, is that we know that economic injustice, as I've just mentioned, as part of our criminal justice system, and systemic racism, as I've just mentioned, as part of our criminal justice system, as well as, by the way, climate change, are part of creating they lead toward violence, they lead toward harm in our communities, and more toward the culture of war, if you will, rather than the culture of peace. So we're saying we want to stress as AEU, as we work toward the future, as we do our ethical action, we want to emphasize the culture of peace. So that's a piece that we're adding to the discussion tonight of criminal justice. We ask our members and our societies, as you work to educate yourselves, that we're working to dismantle systemic racism. So if we work on criminal justice, we're working in that area. If we work to act to end economic injustice, whatever we do to improve the criminal justice system is surely going to be a part of ending economic injustice. And certainly this encourages us to work in coalitions. Now, all of this is to say we have a framework. We're trying to fulfill those commitments that we made to each other during Assembly, that we would work on these goals. And that's our background. It's not necessarily going to shape exactly what we come out with. We don't have to come out of this evening's discussion with any particular piece of this, but what we're hoping is that it's part of the spirit of the discussion and part of the wishes that we have for the future. Okay, now let me just go here. Now, I can stop talking now because it's time to introduce our facilitator. And I'm thrilled to do that. I met Jan Broughton at Lay Leadership Summer School. She was my journey leader. And so she helped me learn many things about ethical culture and about myself and about being part of this community. So I was thrilled when she joined the Ethical Action Committee and helped to talk to us a great deal about, inspire us in looking toward working with the Poor People's Campaign. When it came time to talk about criminal justice, she was ready and she was prepared. As past president of the AEU, as a member of the Ethical Humanist Society of the Triangle, as a member of the Ethical Action Committee, she's got the skills and she's got the background to lead us through this and help us come out on the other end with, I hope, with some very positive outcomes. Jan.
Thank you, Carolyn. I only hope I can live up to that introduction. Carolyn is our enthusiastic, fearless leader, and she has pushed forward many initiatives from Ethical Action. I hope you all pay attention when they come across your emails, the announcements. What I'm going to do today is lead the discussion on what things have your societies been doing in the area of criminal justice? What things interest you and you wish to pursue? And what can the AEU do to help support your efforts? We sent out when the request was sent out, there was a place to indicate what your interests were and what you hope to get out of the discussion. And some of those things centered around reform, including legislation, policy reform, police restructuring, and a redirection of resources, aid to the currently and formerly incarcerated, social programs to end the school to prison pipeline, and direct challenges posed by local and state legislation. So I would like to open this up now and for you to ask your questions and to share the actions that your society is taking in this area. So we can have those hands up. I can start out a little bit by what's happening in the triangle. One of the things we've done, of course, is through programming, inviting speakers. One dynamic speaker, Reverend Gaddy, came and talked about his founding of the community support organization, which helps formerly incarcerated people re-enter the community. And they do that in a variety of ways, but it's that step from prison to real life is a very difficult one. They come out without very few resources, not very good job prospects, limited education in many cases, and potentially, drug problems and stuff. So there's a lot of areas for support that can be done. Is there an organization in your community that helps people? There's another group that escorts people who are currently incarcerated and are trusted enough to go on the outside, who escorts them for a day outing, socially, and to reintroduce them to community, to just make their days a little more bearable, really. Another program that I really like in the community is a bail funding project. They have currently, I think they have $100,000 kitty that's revolving fund, giving bail to people who have maybe not even committed anything very serious. People get picked up for broken tail lights. They can't pay the fines. They end up sitting in jail until their case is called, which can be weeks and months. They can, end up losing their job. For women, they can end up losing their housing, losing their custody of their children. And it's really impoverishment by a system that isn't even necessary. They have the discretion, judges have the discretion not to give bail. I mean, these people are not flight risks. It's just punitive. And so having this revolving bail fund, which anyone could support, or it could be made a project in your society, can really help tremendously in keeping someone out of poverty. Okay, Hugh, I see your hand up. You're unmute.
Thank you.
Oh, we can't hear you.
All right. Both in Philadelphia and Baltimore, where I serve, we're members of interfaith coalitions that do work on criminal justice reform. I'm not going to share those right now. Maybe some members can share some of that. But I want to share a couple of organizations that we've supported in both cities, which advocate for a humanization of those who have been caught up in the criminal justice system. Because one person who registered for tonight mentioned Brian Stevenson's Equal Justice Institute. And one of the things about Stevenson's approach is that he really stresses that humanization of people, which I think is closely linked to our ethical culture values. And one of his expressions that he uses is speaking to those who are incarcerated or formerly incarcerated, you are better than the worst thing you've done. And so often in our retributive system, we take the opposite view, and we just heap on more and more punishment. So in Philadelphia, one of the humanizing organizations that we've supported is Art for Justice. which takes artwork done by people currently serving and advocates for a humanization of the process, for treating these individuals as human beings. A second organization that we've supported in Philadelphia, although a few years back, is the Center for Returning Citizens, because we know that most of the reforms recently have added fees and fines and various economic weights on people returning from prison that they cannot pay. And it's very difficult, much more difficult than it was even 30 years ago, to come out of prison and be able to make it. In Baltimore, Emil knows quite a bit about this organization. He just joined. Out for Justice is a advocacy organization of formerly incarcerated people who, again, help support people who have left, and maybe he can weigh in on that. But for me, the heart of ethical culture is the inherent worth of every individual. And to do that, I'm looking for ways at both societies to humanize people who do get caught in the criminal justice system. That's all for now. I'll come back on those.
Thank you, Hugh. Carolyn, you have your hand up?
Yeah, I just wanted to follow up on this whole, the bail fund, the bail bond fund is really an important activity that can happen if you're in an area, which is, I think, most of the United States, which doesn't have a provision for cite and release. So you're talking about the economic impact of being arrested, going to jail, possibly losing your job, not being able to, maybe not even be able to keep your kids, maybe not being able to pay rent, all of these follow-on effects of arrest. In Texas, accidentally, I'm sure, the legislature passed a bill in about 1997 that said that local law enforcement, local governments could pass ordinances, could provide for their local law enforcement instead of arresting someone for something very minor like that broken tail light or whatever other kind, jaywalking, whatever the things are. Instead of arresting them, taking them into the police station and charging them and then having them go through the court system and have to post bail and go through the system that way, when it may become an economic hardship of much more severe proportions, you can just write them a ticket and they can walk away and show up in court on the day that they have to plead their case and find out then what the penalties might be, whether or not they end up having no penalty at all or they have to do community service. In any case, they don't have the awful economic effect there. And I'm sorry to have talked about that so long, but cite and release is the program that is possible in Texas, and there's exactly one municipality in the entire state, it's a big state, is my little small town, San Marcos, Texas. And it's not popular with the police department, but the city council did decide that we would start using cite and release on some things, and they've been slow to participate with it. It's very hard for them always to understand every time that they really should be citing rather than arresting, but it's starting to happen. But they also got really down and dirty in political campaigns for city council members, and it's become a bit of a fight. And so that's not what we want to get into, but I'm fixing to do that. But that's a possibility that is also out there, to try to get changes where you have, instead of having to have bail, cite and release.
Thank you, Carolyn. See, Jeff has his hand up. Jeff, you can unmute.
Yeah, I think there's lots of opportunities when it comes to post-incarceration. I worked at the Grayston Foundation, and we funded a Project Return, and I also worked on programs funded at Grayston at Fortune Society. And something that is very difficult is to have mentors for a lot of very common things that are great difficulty for people returning after 20 years of prison life. For example, applying for a driver's license, going to places where they're just intimidated by the authority and the bureaucracy. So that, looking for those things, and also looking for information concerning where released prisoners are released to. It was very interesting in Westchester. Yonkers was a prominent place, but it wasn't where everybody lived. So there are support roles that can be played without any great expertise in the criminal law and criminal proceedings. And it was one way that we were able to ask for funding and not ask for a line for mentors, because we had 3 churches that were providing mentors, life mentors. And our society has participated with Memorial Methodist in terms of mentoring mostly women returning from incarceration. And there's just lots of little things that you can do. And you talk about promoting the culture of peace, individual peace, and having the sense that somebody's in your corner is a fundamental element of that.
Thank you. Our society has been involved in a support group project through an interfaith group also. It wasn't for incarcerated people, but it was the same type of support that you're talking about, people who were homeless and getting homes for the first time. And you're right about how much mentoring can help when people aren't familiar with navigating the waters of all that is required of them once they get back into society. So in chat, email, I'm going to put you on the spot. You have an item about the Out for Justice group. Would you like to speak a little bit about that?
Hey, thanks, Jan. Yeah, Emil Volchek here, pronouns he, him, Baltimore Ethical Society. Thanks to Hugh for mentioning Out for Justice. So Out for Justice is a nonprofit that serves returning citizens, ex-offenders, and the 4 major areas are providing support directly related to incarceration and the criminal justice system by providing bail, helping providing legal support with filling out forms and writing up like requests for warrant releases. They also provide a limited amount of direct assistance, but they try more to connect people with resources if they have immediate direct needs. They also educate about voting and advocate for voting rights for felons, for returning citizens, and they do legislative advocacy at the state level for Maryland in Annapolis. And in the past, BES has done joint educational programs with them. We've attended meetings. Our activity level has waxed and waned at times. It's been low during the pandemic. There was one particular peak when one of our members, Richard Heffer, and I have to give him a shout out, was serving as their bookkeeper for about a year when they were going through a tough financial time. So that was like definitely above and beyond. But the head of Out for, we've had a relationship. I would like it to be more, but they're just like the perfect organization for us to be working with, because they kind of hit all the buttons that the main issues that you want. And they're roughly about, sort of our size. They're also a small nonprofit. But so, yeah, I think it's a good organization. I'm glad we're in partnership with them. I'd be happy to answer any questions if people have questions.
Okay. thank you for elaborating on that.
One of the things I just wanted to add that I liked about Out for Justice is that it's driven by the returning citizens. They really own the agenda. They drive they say what their needs are, they determine the strategy. And too many times people who are not the actual victims of the system are making those decisions. So that's a real eye opener to see that.
Mhm. We've had a couple of different kinds of interactions with the criminal justice system. Remember a few years back, we were approached by a person who was incarcerated who wanted to start a humanist group in the prisons. And it wasn't allowed. We weren't one of the groups that were sanctioned. Many of them were, Christian religions, but they went as far as to recognize Wiccans. So I'm not sure why we didn't fall in, at least in between those two. And Randy Best was a leader then, and he eventually didn't have much luck himself with the prison system, but eventually got the AHA involved. And I believe they were able to get their lawyers involved with that and got somewhere. I don't think even now, though, that they actually have a group going. We then were also contacted by another prisoner in a different place who wanted to have humanism discussions. They are requiring a clergy person to sanction this. And our Chris Kamen, who has formerly been certified as a lay leader, has volunteered to do that. But the wheels, as they say, of justice grind slow, and that hasn't come together yet. What we have been able to do for a prisoner who was up for parole, another contact that was made, during COVID, he lost his job in the prison, and he had contacts. We were in contact with him over other things, but to support him in his efforts of getting out on parole. But we were able to give him a small stipend monthly to make up for the loss of income, just so he could buy those, just little daily needs that you have. We have not heard the outcome of his parole, but we are ready to step up, and if he is released into our area, to help him as get those mentoring kinds of support that he might need. He has a sister in another area that he may go closer to family, so we wouldn't be in a position to do much there. But it's something that would be very meaningful on a very small level, one person at a time. Other issues, though, that come up with criminal justice are much broader, and they include legislative kinds of actions. Is there any thing out there that your society has been working on, or just legislation that you know of that requires attention, requires some sort of support or action, or either for or against? I mean, the way things are going, there's so much that is harmful to people who are trying to make it. Dorothy, you have your hand up.
Yeah, I have a question, actually, more than anything else. One of the things that I have found alarming is the whole idea of private prisons and the money involved. And I think a few years ago, or maybe just a couple years ago, there was a lot of press about That one company, I can't remember the name, but I think it's the largest private prison company in in the country, and about how they, they were motivated to keep those beds filled, so, there's a obvious conflict of interest. And I wondered if anybody had any update on whether, as a national issue, that's getting much attention, or is it sorry, email put Geo Group. I think that might be them, but anybody have any information on that?
Well, I don't see any hands yet. Anyone?
I do believe
Okay.
that there's been some reduction in the prison population. And so some of these prisons have been getting repurposed as places to hold immigrants, undocumented folks that have been arrested. So it's, I don't know.
Okay. Paula?
So I want to respond to your earlier question about, is there any legislation? I'm not going to address legislation as such, but there is currently in Santa Clara County a law in front of the Board of Supervisors, the County Board of Supervisors, to approve a new prison, some millions of dollars. And while we as a society haven't taken this on, a few of us as individuals have joined with other groups like Surge. Others have probably heard of Surge, and just taking action, and hope to show up at the Board of Supervisors to say, no, this is not a good idea. Let's put that money in mental health services instead, because that seems to be the growing trend, is to incarcerate people with mental health issues. And that, to me, that isn't ethical thing to do. And California notoriously under Reagan closed all their mental health hospitals and put everybody out and back into the community. So that, I guess that means back into prison, into prisons. I don't know, but anyway, that's an issue, and I'd like to get the society more engaged in that.
Can you say a little bit more about Surge? Because I have seen it mentioned in some of the responses we had.
So Surge, showing up for racial justice. It is a national organization. There are, I don't know if they're branches, society, I don't know what they are. They are groups in various cities, and they are, from my taste, very well organized, very well, whatever they present and whatever they take on, they do well. And it is funded, and that is their focus. So in Silicon Valley, showing up for racial justice a couple of years ago meant that when the police were going to have a raid on immigrant communities where they might find people who were undocumented, the groups that were watching that, keeping an eye on ICE, would call Surge, and Surge would then send people who look like me to show up and just observe, because apparently the powers that be behave differently when there are people observing them. So.
Good to remember that. Jeff, I'm calling you again.
We've had members participate in Surge, and we've had Surge at the society for a session. What I like about them is that they are consciously anti-racist, and they have exercises that help people deal with their own attitudes, and collectively developing a program. We've also, Bart and I have participated in the Westchester Police Reform Coalition. And in terms of legislation, sometimes the most meaningful stuff is very local in terms of what standards police departments follow. And we actually have a case that's longstanding now and has gained new life because of a political decision. But it was a man who was killed by the police after they responded to a medical alert. And so I think that a lot can be done in sort of changing the focus from defund the police to reform police departments. And you can actually gain points of agreement with police. They know they shouldn't be doing certain things, but historically they've been sort of the default for whenever there's an immediate report. And I think a lot of that is because they're 24/7 and they have a dispatching system. And I think that there's a lot of work to be done, especially with these police confrontations with people who are mentally ill. And in Westchester, we've tried to get that reassigned to the Westchester Health Department as opposed to police. And one of the main things in the episode in White Plains was that the police knew this guy and didn't like him. So when the medical alert people said, okay, case over, they said, oh no, we're carrying on with it. And it also came out of that case that the housing authority had given the police keys to everybody's apartment in the housing authority. There's a whole network of how policing is done that bears study and really becoming active locally. And we had the Cuomo mandate that police listen to the community and receive suggestions for reform. So we have a structure there. It's slow in gaining momentum and broader participation, but also trying to develop that very local focus, because then people can see things they can do individually. It's just not advocating for legislation. It's participating in how police do their work.
Right. There is, I'm trying to pull it out of my memory, it's not coming. There's some sort of 8-point program that for police departments to improve certain standards that they're encouraged to adopt to do better policing. Does anybody know what I'm talking about?
That's the Obama era advisement. There was a executive advisory on how to improve policing. Is that what you
It's
mean?
something like a checklist of these 8 procedures that you do, and that's supposed to make policing more humane and all that. And I know the communities around here, Chapel Hill, Durham, Raleigh, their police departments have signed on to this. But then you get groups that check up on it and see how well they're doing. And it's something that you can hold them up to, these certain standards. It might be another way to become active, or at the local level, as Jeff was saying, get your people involved in seeing what's happening.
I think people really need to prepare for the long game for this kind of efforts. I think in general in communities, fear is really inspiring. And it's hard for people to develop confidence when things get relaxed that they'll be safe. So I think it's been very hard to enact bail reform, for instance, for that reason. People are really focused on there's a potential that some possibly violent person might not get incarcerated, and that kind of scuttles the whole thing for the 85-90% of people that probably aren't a risk for that. And so it's just it's important to look for the groups that you can join in with that are prepared to keep moving. One of the things I like about the Westchester Coalition for Police Reform is that they've been meeting since 2011, isn't it? 2013. And they take their bruises here and there, but they keep on chugging, and let's hope they are successful.
Carolyn?
I just wanted to respond to Bart, not to disagree, but to add a little bit of context. In Texas, when San Marcos specifically, when we enabled cite and release, the thing that the police union, the local police union, did was publish ads and put out statements, press releases to the effect that this was a bad idea, because what happens when we just give a ticket and that person comes and rapes you, and that person comes in and assaults you, and that person steals your, and the list of possible crimes that someone with a broken taillight might commit upon your person and your home really created a tense atmosphere. But it was not, it fed fear in the community, but it was not coming from the actions of the people who were cited and released, but it was coming from the people who were supposed to be peace officers. So I'm only bringing that up because that's a tactic that we probably see working in any number of situations, so that it's an effort to maintain control. But I'd like to know more about, or at some point figure out ways to push back against that, because I'd really like to be pushing back against that kind of narrative. I don't like it. So.
I'd like to highlight one success that has happened in North Carolina. In the last few months, the legislature actually passed a law that would remove the felon label against people who were still on, who were released but on parole, or pardoned, not pardoned, that's not what I mean, but anyway, who were
Probation?
seen, probation, thanks.
People who
Dorothy.
serve their time.
Yeah, they'd served their time, but there was still some restrictions placed on them. And so it did pass, so that it enabled 50,000 people to be able to register to vote. Now, this got into the courts and it got turned down by the courts, but then another court, I think, put a stay on that. So the people, at least the people who had already registered, were able to keep their registration. So it's flip-flopping back and forth, but it does look like it will eventually stick. Many of the outrageous things that our legislature does, it takes 2 or 3 years to go through the courts and they get overturned, but they keep trying. But that is another area, this whole idea of who is labeled felon and what restrictions it puts on people. I mean, at the very least, the check the box movements where remove the box that applicants for a job have to answer to, asking if they're a felon, take it off the application. They, if if they can get a foot into the door and get an interview, then that kind of thing can be discussed. But at least they're looking at a person face to face and can assess character that way rather than just a check mark on an application. Okay, Hugh?
Sure, I'll share a little bit about our Philadelphia interfaith organization, which is called Power, Philadelphians Organized to Witness Power and Rebuild. It is a faith in action organization. It's driven by primarily historically Black churches, but the Ethical Society is a member, a number of synagogues are members, and it is really actually very powerful. For those of you who know the story of Larry Krasner, who was elected DA in Philadelphia on a platform of criminal justice reform. In fact, there's a film called Philly DA, an 8-part series, called Philly DA, which talks about what he tries to do, which has been minimizing cash bail systems, which really is just another way to penalize people who are poor, who can't come up with bail. He no longer enforces charges on marijuana possession or sex work. He's reduced the length of sentences on probation, and he has done some pretty dramatic firings in the police officers who have been accused of misbehavior. He's taking on the Philadelphia police lobby in ways that have never really seen before. And but on the daily effort, Marta, who is on this call, just got on from another meeting. So I told her I'd share some of the things that has been done recently. The interfaith organization has done things like, one group is in Power is writing a curriculum guide to educate congregations about things like abolishing parole, ending solitary confinement, and other issues. There is a Citizens Police Oversight Commission that is being formed, and the Power is urging that people who are involved in Live Free, who've been working on criminal justice reform, apply to be on the Citizens Police Oversight Commission, because any commission like that is going to be as good as the people who are on it, and they're going to bring their politics in with them. There's been a driving equality bill that was introduced, which was a bill to stop police from making stops for minor traffic infractions, since so many of those stops are disproportionately on people of color. There are other, they're also looking into getting data from 911 calls that the police are now tracking, requesting data from the city in order to find out who's making the calls on 911, who responds to the calls, how is the co-responder model working, how can we get people to address 911 calls who are mediators, who are crisis negotiators, not the immediate response of the police to arrest. So being involved in Power in Philadelphia has allowed us to do a heck of a lot more than we could do in any on our own, and that has made a big difference. And Marta's welcome to jump in anytime if she wants to add more to that, but I've been very impressed with the work that they've been doing. Also, sorry, I was going to, let me leave it there for now.
I was just going to say, certainly sounds like there's a multitude of opportunities that to participate in various things that would speak to multiple interests.
And since Marta's on the phone, it's *6 to unmute and *9 to raise your hand, by the way.
I guess I'll add one other item. Ending cash bail has been a very strong push in Philadelphia as well. And I'll just put in the chat a link to that campaign. because if you live in a city that has cash bail, it is a very obviously discriminatory practice, and I urge you to consider looking around in your city if there's or area if there's a similar effort to try to end cash bail.
Bart?
There we go. So I was wondering, I see there's a number of New Yorkers on the call, and there's been a recent, last couple of years, strong effort to close Rikers Island. And I wonder if anyone from the New York area had anything to say about that, or say about what their society might have done in relation to that effort.
Any takers?
Rikers Island, for those who don't know, is just a horrible place of confinement. I know somebody who spent a couple of months in Rikers after he spent about 6 months in Manhattan at their detention facility there. He was then sent to Rikers, and it was for stealing some power bars from not a CVS. What is it in New York? Dean.
Like a bodega, or?
No, it's
Wayne Reed.
Wayne Reed.
Dwayne Reed. Oh, yeah.
Yeah.
Well, and these are places where people have not gotten to trial. They're just being held awaiting trial, and they may
That's right,
be
it's jail.
there for months and months for these minor offenses, and you're just creating people who are much worse off than when they started. It's a terrible situation.
And they've been returned there for minor parole violations, but the situation is so bad that the city and the state are forced to release the folks deemed less risky, because the overcrowding factor is just so dehumanizing. They're being forced to take a chance. The common perception is that people don't want the criminal element, to rejoin society, but they're bucking that attitude and saying we've got to really lower the population. And a lot of these folks are not dangerous. And of course, those who haven't even been convicted, it's a grave injustice.
So, are there other? Oh, Carolyn? All right.
Well, I just was gonna. This is more a hypothetical than anything else. It's something that went through my mind when one of the things that happens with people when they're released from prison in Texas is that sometimes they are placed in sort of halfway houses. They live in a group home situation for a period of months, and they have some supervision. They are allowed out to work, look for a job, and begin to try to put their lives back together. Sadly, well, I don't know if it's sad, but one of the criteria is that they have to go to church. They have to go to some religious organization on a Sunday. And not everybody wants to do that. And so I'm wondering, it just crossed I fantasized at one point. That's how, let's just say it was a fantasy that I had, that couldn't we work with some of those halfway houses and invite these folks to come to the Ethical Society on Sundays, help them meet their requirement, get them out of a situation that they were uncomfortable with, and hopefully also welcome them back into the community. It just crossed my mind that that was another way to serve, to build community, to look at how to bring people back to where we are. That was a thought.
That's a good one, Carolyn. Because so many of these activities take place through faith groups. And guess we're a good alternative for that in a community kind of setting. That's why we do the work through interfaith group group here, because they're the people who are doing a lot of the work, and it aids us to help in that effort.
I remember, Jan, if I could just throw
Sure.
one thing out there. We saw a film, I believe it was at the Albany Assembly, called Campaign Zero, which was about Sing Sing's, a program at Sing Sing, which gave people the opportunity to earn degrees.
Hudson Link, yeah.
And it was a very moving film. And there are a lot of other ways that we can demand that people who are serving time use the time to put themselves in a position to be self-sufficient when they leave. I find it amazing at how far our criminal justice system does to take every possibility for self-improvement away from people who are serving time. This was a point that I made a couple of years ago. Believe it or not, the Trump administration supported, where they were a driving force in keeping Pell Grants going to prisons. And yeah, it was kind of shocking, but there are reasons why conservatives would support that, because if you believe that everybody should stand up on their own and be taxpayers and get a job, they have got to have the skill set to come out of incarceration able to take a job. And that we keep denying, we keep cutting the budgets for those. So if you are near an institution, find out if they have continuing education opportunities and how you can support those.
Okay.
Betty, were you raising your hand? You gotta unmute. There. No. Okay.
Not yet.
Okay, not yet.
Okay.
There. Hold it down. Now you can talk. Oh, no.
Speak.
Yeah. Hold down the space bar.
Yeah. And hold on to it. Don't let it go. There. Talk.
Okay, I was basically going to raise the Pell issue again because I knew that it had been reinstated, but I wonder how much the reinstatement has to do with what in fact is happening in the country. And one of the issues, this is a difficult one to raise in this in the setting, because basically the long-term goal is to disestablish prisons. But on the other hand, at this point, one of the serious problems is that there are very few youth facilities, and most youth are thrown into adult facilities. And in some way, they are so poorly served that there needs to be some thought being given to options there too. I just wanted to raise that.
Yeah. Emil?
Hi, it's Kathleen.
Kathleen.
Hi. We had a really good speaker at the Baltimore Ethical Society. His name was Mel Curry, and he talked with us about his experience as a tutor and doing continuing education classes, I think at Jessup in Maryland. And he had one of the frustrating experiences he had was he had a student who was really talented. He was teaching math. And this guy was really talented and, breezed through calculus and whatever course he was doing. And when Mel wanted to do an advanced course, there wasn't anybody else who signed up for it. So he offered to do, one-on-one just for this guy, and they wouldn't approve it. And then afterwards, he wasn't allowed to have any contact with this guy after he was released. That was one of the agreements that he signed. So there was no way for him to continue mentoring him. In fact, it was forbidden.
It's like they make these things up on the fly just to frustrate good common sense. Well, we've reached a little after 9 o'clock. Carolyn,
Yeah.
what do you think about wrapping up now?
Well, at least looking at where can we go from here. We have heard that you are often involved with interfaith organizations to get some of this work done. That you also have criminal justice organizations or organizations that are oriented toward criminal justice that you are working with. So one of the things that is very positive, I think, is hearing the degree to which you are working in alliance with other groups in the community. That there are groups that are active in this area that have spread out the effort among other members of the community, and your society is partnering with them. We think that that's a big way to get ethical action done. That's a good way to get it done. So kudos to all of you who are doing that. For those of you who have not mentioned partnerships of various sorts and think some members of your society might be interested, the question is, how do we find those resources for you in your community? Can you look for them? Can we look with you? Can we provide links to national organizations? What can we do to support that kind of effort? I'm going to move right on really fast to another set of questions, because then we can all talk about where we want to go with this. The other possibility, or one possibility that we want to recommend, is the Poor People's Campaign. That has a very strong faith element to it, which some people find difficult. But any, what did Adler say? Any reasonable faith, any true belief, any legitimate, I've forgotten his words, but if any honest belief, if there are several sets of there are several different groups that are partnering through the Poor People's Campaign, and it's not a strictly religious group, but faith is a heavy element there. Even so, I've gone too far, I've mentioned that too much. Even so, their agenda is very much in line with what we're talking about. Part of their Jubilee platform is exactly the things that we've talked about: cash bond, solitary confinement, incarceration of juveniles, all of these kinds of things. And we actually, I'm not going to show the slide, but we have, if you look at the Poor People's Campaign and see their agenda, the things that they're working on, it's exactly the same kinds of things we are. The only reason we're bringing it up is because they have a national presence, and they have local groups in your states. There is actually a Texas Poor People's Campaign. There's one in every state where we have a local society. So the possibilities for partnership are significant, particularly if we're looking at this in terms of our commitments that we've made over the past couple of years of how we want to approach all of our ethical actions, the spirit that we're doing it in. Another element of how to move forward is a little bit of something there that the Ethical Action Committee is indulging me and allowing me to talk about. And I think it was Hugh that mentioned the opportunity in, maybe it was Baltimore, for a new commission that's been formed and that they're asking for community volunteers to participate in that. It was at Philadelphia. And Bart mentioned playing the long game. And both of the guys are singing my song right now. Because one of the things that my experience, which has been quite long in dealing with legislation and public policy, and working on AIDS policy in Texas was not easy. You did have to learn a little bit more about the system. One of the things that you learn is that if you're not at the table, you're what's on the menu. And I want to suggest that we start thinking in terms of, yes, we want to help. Yes, some of us can only do just so much because of the epidemic. Some of us, I need knee surgery, so I'm not going to be on many marches at this point right now. And so I do a lot of my work from the computer. But yes, we should continue doing these activities that we've talked about. But sometimes we need to be the policymakers. I think we got a lot of smart people in ethical culture. You're well educated, you have incredible experience in all sorts of professions, and you would be a very good member of some board or commission. Uh-oh, I just knocked my camera down. Did I lose my camera? You would be a very, I'm gone. I got really excited, but at least I've got my microphone. You would be a good member of a board or commission that makes policy that says we want to have cite and release in our community, or we think solitary confinement is torture. That you bring your ethical culture values to the table, to the conversation as an insider. Now, that's easier said than done. There's a lot of work to do it, but I just got really upset when I found out the police department here is really working against cite and release. And I figure it's time to get involved. So I'm courting people, and I'm going to see if I can't weasel my way onto one of those boards and commissions. I'm not too old. It's okay. So I want you to think about that. I'm not saying I have a plan or here's the rules 1, 2, 3 to do it. But I would like for us to think not only working in partnership with other organizations, not only doing the good work that you're already doing in your communities, but let's start thinking big and long and powerful, if you will, because I think we've got a lot to give. And having said that, that's 1, 2, 3, 4 kinds of things. The next question is, what do we want to do next? Do we want to carry this conversation on? Have we got more to say to each other? Do we need to stay in touch some way? A mailing list, another meeting? How can we help you? What can the AEU, that's Bart, what can we do to support you? How can we support each other? Where's next? Now I'm through talking, but I thank you very much for listening. I'm going to find my camera now.
I think maybe a show of not race hands, but Carolyn, there's a feature under reactions where if you bring it up, you'll see a little green check mark and a red X mark. I think that stands for yes and no. If we could maybe see a show of hands, if you would do that, we can look on the participant list, those of you who would like to carry this conversation on a little bit further, maybe cover some topics we haven't covered. Just and to see with the interest that might be generated tonight and for future actions. Okay. See, we've got, I see 9 check marks. No, like I said, 12.
We do have a hand raised. Oh, did.
Is there a way that we can save the chat? I'd be willing to clean it up a little bit and just send the links out to the people that were on tonight, Bart. Is that possible to follow up with the folks?
Yes.
Okay, if you
Yes.
send me the chat, I'll just clean it up and get it back to you to send out to the folks that came, because there are a lot of good links and information there.
Yeah, and actually any one of us can save the chat the way the system is set up. So if you go to the chat window, the 3 dots, the ellipsis at the bottom right, click on that and allow you to save the chat to your own device. So you won't have to wait in that case, but we'll be happy to also be sending it out to all the people who registered for this.
Okay, I got it, Bart, and I will clean it up and send it back to you.
And I got a print screen, a screenshot of the group. So
Okay.
I know, I see, I got the hands up thing. Okay, if I can get in here. All right. All right, so we know who might want to stay, as it were, on the get together.
All right, I can clear the feedback then.
Yeah. Landscape, I think. So paste.
But also unraised hand.
Got it.
So if you want to raise your hand, then we could do that again. And Richard's been pretty patient there.
Yeah.
I just wanted to say that I do think we need to continue. I think we need to do more sharing of what we're doing locally.
Okay.
And I'm also wondering if national, the AEU is doing something nationally as far as coalitions with other groups, just like you mentioned the Poor People's Campaign. And besides that, I can't give, I'm sorry to say, a chapter report, but we do have other members that are very active and forming committees or working on committees, including Arthur Dobrin, David Sprinson, I'm sure names that you're all familiar with, and Joe Lopresti. So unfortunately, we're unable to be here tonight, but are very involved in local social action. So yes, we need to continue this work. Oh, one last thought, if I may. Activism. I am not comfortable with that. Okay, I'm not haven't even been a letter writer. But so maybe we need like some skill workshops that would enable us. Like, for instance, this afternoon, I attended a public speaking workshop in which, suggestions were made about how to be a more effective presenter, facilitator, coordinator. And so maybe we could all use, many of us, I could, use more training so that we could become more effective in reaching out to the community and the powers that be and other groups.
Yes. Glad to. I'm writing that down. Anything else that you all might like? How do we trying to see smooth on Zoom? Oh yeah. It's not possible to be smooth on Zoom, Drawer. I'm sorry. It just not a skill. No, not going to happen. We try.
Carolyn, I think you can be. I think just tilt the camera down a little bit would help. Right now, your head is being cut off at the neck. And I think it's important because we do videotape these talks, and they're showing. You look much better right now. And when the camera fell down, I thought you fell. What a relief it was only the camera.
Thank you.
I do wonder how we can connect, because everything to me seems to be about the elections and politics, and we could talk but getting the right person elected, whether it's your councilman or your state senator. I know in Texas, we don't have the same problems you do, but if we could help you in your campaigns in Texas, that could do more for prison reform than
Yes.
all these, little bits that we could do with our local groups. So I personally would like it if we could be told who to write postcards to, what districts, how to phrase the postcard, because we do have people who volunteer to write voter postcards, and that's something.
It's very much something. It's a big
and
thing.
if I could just jump in, I think when Bart said that fear drives people, there's a lot of people who think that the broken window policing, that is catching people for the small crimes, has reduced crime overall. And they're very happy to see that there's less crime in the street without considering the unfairness of the poor guy who jumped the subway token, now having to spend his night and months in Rikers. So, I mean, that balance between keeping us safe and being fair to the lawbreakers is very tricky. And I don't think there's much sympathy in the public for being more lenient towards the lawbreakers. So I would like help in how do we frame the argument that we're all safer as a society if we don't put people in jail for jumping the subway turnstile, and if we save that money for something else. So how do we rephrase the argument that we're safer with less incarceration, as opposed to safer, the more people we put in jail, the safer I am. There's a certain, if everybody's in jail, I'll be pretty safe.
You're talking about messaging.
Yes.
And how do we reframe this? We're talking about welcoming people into our community after they've been in prison, trying to bring them back into society, and yet they've been in a horribly brutal environment and damaged, perhaps, by that environment. And how did they get there? Perhaps out of circumstances that we don't begin to imagine, that put them in the wrong place at the wrong time and making the wrong decision, and they're going to pay the price the rest of their life. It goes on, and I think a lot of this is early childhood and families and the work that we need to be doing from the beginning. And to get that message out is also working on criminal justice reform.
Absolutely.
It's a piece of it.
I also think a lot is driven by anti-Blackness. And I do strongly encourage our folks to participate in the anti-racism dialogues that are just unrolling right now.
Yes.
I think in so many ways we live in separate worlds, and we need to find more ways to push past those barriers and to be part of a larger community. And I think so many places there's just walls up between groups, and the folks on one side of the wall don't mind if folks on the other side get incarcerated.
Yeah, and don't know much about their circumstances or worry about what the effect is. Yeah, it's real. Good point. So we have those of you who have indicated support, I mean not support, but interest in continuing. We will certainly be sending you. Hugh is going to prepare a summary, a cleaned up version of the chat with all the links that are there so that we can follow up and let you have that information. We'll probably be checking with all of you anyway, and there were some people who registered and did not attend, and we'll see if they're interested in participating. And we'll look at some opportunities for how we go forward. That might be some way to get more resources available for you to look at yourselves and work on your own. And if you have time for more meetings, we certainly can gather again, because it sounded to me like, yes, you did want to have some more conversations. So we're happy to facilitate that. How often? We'll ask you, and we'll see what people are interested in. I think I see a poll developing, things like that. Any other thoughts? Any other concerns, ideas? Okay. Gosh. People, thank you so much for giving time in the middle of the week on a Wednesday night. And it is Wednesday. I got that right. Thank you again, Richard.
And thank you, Jan and Carolyn, for pulling this together. Whoop, whoop.
Oh, that was fun. Working with Jan is, yeah. She's a good one. Okay. All right.
Okay.
Thank you. Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
All right, everybody.
Saving the
Good
chat.
Night.
Have a good night.
Yeah.
Good night, good night.
On time. Yeah. Okay. We're
There
good.
we go.
All righty.
Where's my back?
Hold on.
Let's stop recording. Okay. All righty.
All right, there we go. Well, folks, I'm going to end this session right now.
Okay. Thank you
Great
very
to see
much.
you all.
Bye.
Bye.
All.
Bye-bye.
Thank you.